perspective from the Johnson & Johnson story. When you see this illicit trade or the parallel import coming, their impact is at two levels. It's both at an economic level and also at the patient safety level. First of all, let's just look at the economic level. I'll just give you an example of one of our biggest brands. It's one of the baby's product that we have. To just see the impact of this thing is bigger than whatever we can think. We had a Nelson study that was done some few years ago. I think it was 2 years ago and last year, just to check about our market share. They came back and told us that our market share is about 42% for that product. But to our amazement, when we looked at what they have said and what our real market share is for the brand, our market share is just 4%. So the question is that who is with the 38%? They are all forms of parallel import or illicit trade product that are in the economy. And just imagine we are the one making these sales, the level of tax that would have had to pay the government, the level of employment of many more people that would have been able to bring on board would have been much more. But today, we are battling that, yes, taking a lot of issues and confronting it with the regulators and all of that. That, as painful as that is, even more painful in the impact on the patient. I'll say a story that happened I think it was sometime last year also, just to show how painful this impact of this illicit trade because of lack of respect for IP infringement and enforcement has on the safety of the patient. A patient walked into our office with a baby and was looking for our office frantically, and the patient walked in. When the patient got there, saw one of my colleagues and just brought a baby, and said, I bought one of your products and it has given my baby rash. Before we could say, Jack, she's opened, the bum of the baby, as we normally say, and you see so much rash there. Then my colleague told her to just hold on, called some other colleague and asked her, can we see the product that you have used? When she showed us the product, we found out that it was a parallel import of our brand that was not made for our market. The question is, how did it get in? And that's the bigger question today, which as the conversation goes on, we need to have answers to or deliberate about it. Those products that is not made for a particular market, the reason why they are not made is because there are things that are necessary. For example, registration of product with NAFDAC for products that are made for our environment needs to have stability zone 4B test, which is product that can survive at 30 degrees and above. Unlike when you bring a product that is made for 15 degrees, what you get in the UK and in some of the other colder region of the world. You bring them in and you think that they are the same thing. Only everybody here, friends, they are not the same thing. Whatever I need to tell you or call you to make us know this, they are not. Imagine it was something that had to be swallowed. The implication would have even been more. Now it is used as a tropical baby lotion. It could have been a drug. And we've had people that have used drugs that are not made for this environment, that have been brought into the country through whatsoever means, and it's causing havoc in the life of the patient. So I just want to steer us and challenge us that as we deliberate together, this impact and the issue around IP infringement is real, and it's a big deal. The impact on the lives of patients is more than what it is. I remember, just as a roundup, I remember one experience that I had, and that experience made me really weak. I had a man that came to me, he had hepatitis at that point in time. And there was a medication that was prescribed to that need to be kept at 2 to 8 degrees because the product has cold chain. This patient, in trying to also get something cheaper, went and bought the same product, but the products were one of those products that was brought in through illicit ways, and they didn't respect the cold chain. The patient were using this product expecting that as I'm using this product, my disease or my viral load should be coming down. What the patient experienced was that the viral load was going up. At a very late stage, the patient has been on the product close to 1 year, only for them to track that the patient has developed what they call HCC, hepatocellular carcinoma, and at that point it was too late. The patient disease was caught on time, but the patient was on the wrong and ineffective medication because it was illicitly brought into the country. We lost this patient at the end of the day. So I just wanted to have this vivid example of the impact of this on patient safety. It's there for us. We are facing it real time, and we're looking for solutions by engaging the right stakeholders in NAFDAC and looking at things around tracking and serialization, and also trying to push that there needs to be stricter enforcement and stricter judgment on people that patronize or people that do all of this because of the impact it has on the lives of patients. So thank you very much, ABC, for this platform to just share our experience and to just steer the conversation as we move on in this conversation today. Thank you very much, Joseph. Over to you.
Thank you very much, sir. I would like to call on Jo Ellen Aaron, who will be making a short presentation or remarks on what the USPTO does in the area of IP infringement. Hi, Jo Ellen.
Hello, everybody. Thank you for this wonderful invitation, and what a great program to be hosting during these times. I wanted to just at the U.S. Patent and Trademark Office, we have an Africa team, and we have intellectual property experts on all working with some of the countries in Africa and our stakeholders, as well as ARIPO and AWAPI, on addressing infringement in all areas of IP, especially to address counterfeit COVID products, and working with our colleagues also in law enforcement, which Tanya will speak more about. But we are very excited to be part of this program, and I can provide, after the meeting, a link to our COVID-19 page, which provides our stakeholders and any stakeholders who can access the internet with a number of resources to address this serious problem as we go into the stage of the vaccine as well. So with that, I can provide more information later, but I really appreciate this opportunity. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. So we'll go over to Chijoke Wabuti, partner at PwC, who would give PwC's findings on IP infringement in the pharmaceutical sector. PwC did a white paper in 2019 on the impact of IP infringement for during the Intellectual Property Symposium. So over to you, Chijoke.
I can share my screen.
Yes, you can. Yes, sir.
Okay, cool. We'll do that now. Please let me know when you can see my screen.
Yes, we can see it.
Okay. All right. So thank you all for having me this afternoon. Essentially, what I'll be talking about is the outcomes of the secondary research that we did on IP infringement and the Nigerian pharmaceutical sector. And to be honest, I mean, hearing what has already been said this afternoon, it just, tells you the real need to spotlight these issues. And I'm going to quickly run through some of the findings, but just to caveat again, it's from secondary data, and I think there's a bit more work we need to do in terms of really determining what the magnitude of the issues are. Okay, so essentially, we'll just quickly look at what is IP, which is something we've pretty much deal with on a daily basis, and it covers a vast range of activities, and it really plays an important role in both economic and cultural life. And if you look at some of the different types of IP: patent, copyright, trademark, industry design. And if you start thinking about the fact that where you have a situation where, works or goods which are protected by laws are used or copied without any form of permission, then you start seeing where IP infringement starts to come to play. And you see that a lot of this happens in the cultural and creative industry, in ICT, FMCG, and obviously the pharmaceutical industries. And what we really don't understand is, I think I love what the last speaker said about the real dangers of IP infringement and what we have to be dealing with, on a daily basis, both from immediate impact from a health standpoint, financial losses, and all that. So you just find out that really, this is an extremely important issue that we're dealing with. And if we delve down into it a little bit more to start looking at even the impact of IP on economies, right? I don't know if this is moving. Okay, next slide, good. So if you start looking at the impact of IP on economies, right? If we look at the top 10 economies by GDP, in 2019, and the top 10 economies by IP strength, and what we mean by IP strength here is the strength of your laws, the regulations, and enforcement, you'd find out that at least 60% or 66% of them have one thing in common. They have strong IP laws, and they're in the top 10 economies. So you'd find out that there's that positive correlation between the two. And if you even delve down in a little deeper into it, you'd see that, a 1% improvement in patent protection, for instance, could result in almost, 3 times that in terms of increase in FDI. Look at local innovation as well. If you look at a 1% increase in the strength of patent, trademark, and copyright protection, chances are that you're going to see anywhere between 1.5 to 3.3% increase in domestic R&D. And if you think about it, domestic R&D, innovations, and the rest, when you don't have the right IP laws to actually protect innovation, you'd find out that people aren't really enthused about the fact that if I'm going to, produce something that will be copied or counterfeited, so that's why you start seeing the magnitude of what we need to do from an IP infringement standpoint. And obviously, if you look at an improvement in trademark and copyright protection, a 1% increase could lead to anywhere between 4 to 7 times that in FDI. So that's obviously one thing that if we're talking about ease of doing business and attractiveness of Nigeria as an investment destination, then you need to get your IP environment right. And if you start, as PwC, we get a lot of these inquiries from our clients, and you find out that most of the times these are the kind of questions they want to ask. They're asking us in terms of making their final investment decisions in Nigeria. We just tried to do a quick journey of how this thing has kind of, started growing in Nigeria. Now, if you look at, for instance, if you look at a 50-year journey, from the 1970s, the oil boom, great, increased cash flow. There's a lot of wealth around, but also you then start seeing that people then start, getting a bit more involved in the pharmaceutical industry, setting up big pharmacies, production lots in Nigeria. But over time, when the global recession started straining the pharmaceutical industry, they started outsourcing a lot of their production to where you'd have cheap labor and, lower cost of production. But when you outsource that, you also then have the, unintended consequence of then not being able to, protect your IP as you should. And then you're also operating in countries that don't have very strong laws and very strong enforcement, which is what started creating that avenue where people could start producing illicit drugs. And unfortunately, Nigeria then became a destination of choice. And that's what you'd find out, that a lot of these illicit drugs are imported into Nigeria and now, traded openly in markets. And, if you start seeing some of the figures start really making you a bit more worried when you start thinking about the fact that, for instance, in open air markets, some of the big open air markets that we have here, over 50% or just about 50% of the drugs there are counterfeit or fake. And if you look at the chain, or essentially the delivery chain for this, some of these are imported, and when you import from foreign producers, obviously there's also illicit parallel production in country. You're able to then push it to the open markets where you have strong distributor networks, and then you also have illicit distributors who have formed an extremely strong network of distribution points. And then you also have local manufacturers as well, where you don't have a lot of regulation. So most of these guys are unregulated, and they're just pushing out drugs there. And the truth is, if you start looking at some of the purchase points, pharmacies, hospitals are picking up some of these drugs, wholesalers and retailers. And it's obviously, it's like a vicious cycle here, because these things are all coming in, and they have a direct negative impact on the users. And as we've also already heard today, if we look at some of the numbers as well, over 200 billion is estimated to be lost to the Nigerian economy from counterfeit medicines annually. 122,000 children under 5 years die each year. And I think it's a bit dated, because I think that number is a whole lot more, which is why I think we need to do a bit more primary research into this, because a lot of this is secondary data. 40% of Pfizer medicines in Nigeria was sourced from illicit parallel importation, which is obviously a form of counterfeiting. And, I've talked about it before, 50% of drugs, food, and drinks sold in open markets are counterfeit. And if you start thinking about the reasons for this, they're not far-fetched. We are a very poor country. The low economic status of the majority of our population is contributing to this. And if you think about the fact that most of the people that live in the rural areas, a lot of us think about Nigeria and we think about our immediate environs, Lagos, but that is a huge population lives outside of Lagos. Even within Lagos, there are parts of Lagos where you have a significant number of people, that are, economically disadvantaged. And it's very easy when you think about the illicit drugs. I walked into a pharmacy one day and I saw one of the famous brand names that was imported, and it was 10 times the price of a local variant. Now I have no way of determining whether the local variant is real or fake. So what would I do? Because I have the means, I buy that one that is 10 times the price, because I think, or I hope, that one is actually real. But if you then think about the fact that a lot of people out there have no means of determining this, they look for cheap options to buy. And then obviously with the low level of education and awareness about this, it just continues to, expand. And then if you think about the seemingly high cost of what you would consider illicit medicine, because if you think about it, anything that is regulated, regulations also come at a cost. So if you start looking at being the cost of these illicit medicines and the cost of regulations, people tend to shy away from that to look at what they think has always worked for them all the time. And then obviously the limited availability of these illicit medicines in rural locations. So these big markets actually form like a base for a lot of what happens. So what they do, you just come, pick all you need from the open markets, go and start selling in the rural areas, and just continues to expand. Now, if you look at some of the things that the government and private sector alike have also tried to do, there have been regulations in Nigeria, obviously, with Counterfeit, Fake Drugs and Unwholesome Processed Foods Act, passed in 2015, the NAFDAC Act as well, and obviously things like mobile authentication services and some of the work that the Pharmacy Council of Nigeria is doing. So there's a lot going on, and you'd even have manufacturing companies that have also started patented manufacturing processes. The mobile authentication services is something that has also started becoming a bit more open, and people are a bit more aware about it. But if you look at all these things as well, I guess the question really is the people that are even meant to be supervising these things. Do we even have the right education? Are these people well equipped to be able to monitor and enforce? We think about corruption as well. We can't ignore the fact that there's significant corruption, and this would allow some of these officials not necessarily doing what they should do with regards to enforcement. Or if you start looking at some of the things around, the fact that these goods come into Nigeria without the right level of regulations. Now, if you look at some of the things we think we could do at this point, for instance, if we start looking at what is the cost of non-compliance for you, if it's not too much, why would I want to even comply? So we need to start looking at how do we improve our infringement enforcement procedures and deficiencies we have in legislation. I think we also need to kind of upskill the people that are even the people that are even meant to enforce it, or the people that are actually meant to administer the regulations as well. Our borders need to tighten. These illicit drugs keep coming into our porous borders, which are if I want to lack of a better word, it's a joke. So we need to start looking at how do we tighten access into the country, and collaborations as well. How do we even stop these productions at source? So we do know the usual suspects where these drugs come. We do know the drug routes for the illicit drugs that come into the country. So the question is there any level of collaboration with the source of these drugs, and to be able to start engaging a bit more with them to see how can we collaborate a whole lot better to ensure that we reduce the inflow of the drugs into the country. Then collaboration on a local standpoint as well, to ensure that, if we're looking to do a widespread distribution of illicit medicines to people who are the lower economic class, the question is how do we even get to a point where you're able to produce those drugs and distribute them at a price that is affordable? So we probably need to look at government intervention as well in terms of, incentives or any kind of waivers for drug producers, and also looking to fund a bit more of this collaboration when we start thinking about the private sector's intervention in it and government intervention. How do we kind of collaborate a whole lot more to ensure that illicit drug distribution is a lot wider, and it's coming in at a more reduced cost. Public awareness campaign is extremely important. People need to know there's a lot happening now, but I think we need to ramp it up to just kind of understand the dangers of using illicit drugs or counterfeited drugs, and ensuring that we have a better process. I mean, we've talked about technology. It comes at a cost, but we need to be able to also ensure that these are properly regulated. This is just kind of because I just had 10 minutes, but this is kind of a high-level review of the white paper we did. But like I said, I think there's a bit more work that needs to be done in terms of, an in-depth study, getting primary data, looking at, some of the direct and immediate impact of this, and obviously engaging with the policymakers and ensuring that you're able to upskill them to be able to even administer these laws and regulations at the level that is compared to global best practices. So thank you very much for your time, and I'm looking forward to an engaging conversation in this conference.
Thank you very much, Chijioke. Thanks for the wonderful presentation. We'll be moving over to the panel. Will be moderated by BC Olabenji from the U.S. Department of Justice. Hi, BC.
Hi, Joseph. Hello, everyone. I'm very pleased to be with you today. I'd like to welcome the audience and our panelists, our distinguished panelists. Please, can you confirm that you hear me all right?
Well, I can hear you.
Yes, I can hear you.
Excellent.
Yes,
okay, thank you very much. Just a quick housekeeping reminder. If we have any question, please, you can raise your hands after the panel session is over, or you can leave your questions in the chat box. It will be attended to during the Q&A session. I'd like to thank, Chijioke for, sharing with us the details of the PwC white paper report. It was, very elaborate, although, the caveat was its secondary data. However, I can assure that, it's very representative, of what is in the market. It reflects what the real issues are. And so until we find, any more comprehensive reports, this will do in, us having this, conversation. And I'd like us, to start from there with the panelists. And by the way, we on the panel, we have 3 guests who will be speaking to us. We'll have Mr. Obafemi Agaba. We also have, the Honorable Legislator with us, and we have Tanya Hill, with us. I'm very delighted to be speaking with them today, and they would help us, to just break it down a little more, to practical things that we can all relate to. Now, if we look at the reports that Chijioke just shared with us, I'd like to say that what struck out, to me would be some kind of, say, 3-pronged approach, of how this IP infringement in the pharma sector, can be tackled. That there are the issues of legislation, there's the issue of enforcement, and enforcement has, so many, factors underlying it. There's the issue of financing, there's institution building, there's the need for training for officials like Chijioke alluded to, and there's a place for policy, where you have stakeholder collaborations, where there's need for advocacy, there's research, and there's just a whole gamut, of factors, that can help us approach this issue, holistically. So it's my hope that in the course of this conversation, albeit it's a very brief one, that we'll be able to at least get touch points that can help us do perhaps further research, or start a new conversation, on how we can find, tailor-made solutions to some of these issues. And without taking further time, I would want to start with Mr. Agaba. And my question to Mr. Agaba is, when we talk about IP protection, we know that it starts from somewhere. And for the sake of our audience who perhaps don't have a background in intellectual property, or are not pharmacists, or are not business owners, perhaps as students, I'd like to know what the Intellectual Property Association of Nigeria's experience is in registration of patents and trademarks and the ensuing protection, on one hand, and on another leg, whether their experience, so far as a body of stakeholders in IP law, whether their experience, suggests that legislation is adequate to compensate the rights holder. That'll be my first question. I have another question, and you have 10 minutes to please address it. Over to you, Obafemi.
Thank you very much, Olabisi. Good afternoon, all, and thank you for the invite. I'm always very happy to discuss intellectual property related issues. I'm a partner at Jackson, Etty and Edu, a foremost commercial law firm in Nigeria, where I head the brand protection team and also the sector head for FMCG. And I am also the vice president of the Intellectual Property Law Association of Nigeria. And so anything IP is my forte and my homeland as a lawyer. Now, interesting question Olabisi has thrown, and the truth and the reality is that as far as intellectual property is concerned in Nigeria, we do have legislations, and that's the reality. We do have the Patent and Designs Act, we have the Trademarks Act, we have the Copyright Act, and I can easily tell you that the Nigerian Copyright Act is easily one of the best, globally. That is not to say that there are no room for improvement, especially with what is happening in the digital space. The Trademarks Act of Nigeria was enacted the year my father was born, as far back as 1938. So that easily tells us that that law is in need of a lot of rejigging. And we've been fighting for us to have a new trademark legislation come on board. And I'm happy that the legislator is here. It's something we need to hold him by his shirt, like Jesus was held by his robe. So he can help us in ensuring that there is a change in that direction. But be that as it may, the reality is that the law we have as of today is still effective as a body of law to deal with some of the issues we have. So in the Patents and Designs Act, there are provisions for infringement and says that you shall not infringe the patent that has been granted to another entity. And the same thing goes with the Copyright Act, the same thing in the Trademarks Act, Section 5.2. They are all clear. They protect the right of the brand owners, of the right holders. So the real question then is, what is the problem we have with IP protection and enforcement? Now, on the one hand, we have the Patent and Trademarks Registry of Nigeria, and that is a government body charged with registration of trademarks and registration of patents. Now, I would say easily that these bodies have significantly improved from where they were 10 years down the line or 5 years down the line. I think the gentleman that is heading the trademark registry and the lady at the patent registry have done well in terms of how fast our registration processes have become, or how more regularly we find journals coming out. That is fantastic. But the major challenge with the registry is what we would describe as the digitization of records, especially when it comes to searches. It is still difficult to do an effective and reliable and timely search for trademarks and patents in Nigeria. And this is very fundamental in the protection scheme or in the protection regime of IP. So this is an area where we need resources to be deployed to ensure that that part of the process, is faster, and we can easily move on to having our letters patent, our trademark registration certificates coming out faster. But in terms of enforcement, I would say that enforcement of IP rights in Nigeria would typically come in three different ways. We have the civil enforcement, we have the criminal enforcement, and we have the regulatory or administrative enforcement. So with the civil action, it typically says that you have infringed somebody's trademark or you have infringed somebody's patent. You have a right to go to the civil court to sue for infringement of trademarks or infringement of patent, as it were. And the law gives you all the reliefs that are good enough to protect you. And that is the truth. Reliefs in terms of injunctions, reliefs in terms of damages, reliefs in terms of destruction, and things like that. But the real challenge that we find is, one, the slow pace at which cases move in the country. So some of us have advocated that do we need to have an IP court, have some judges dedicated to intellectual property? Do we need that? Is that what is going to make our cases move very faster? Typically, I have infringement actions that I have been dealing with for the past 8 years. I can tell you that easily. Sometimes you are lucky, you might finish in 2 or 3 years. So the clients get frustrated with the delay. And really, with that kind of delay, the easy saying is that justice delayed is justice denied. Another thing is that I think our judges have been a bit skeptical in granting large damages in terms of monetary damages that are heavy enough to deter. I think our judges need to get bolder in that direction, to meet the infringer where he has met the brand owner. I think that is an area where we think we need significant improvement. Again, is in terms of enforcement generally, the court system needs to understand IP a bit more. I think that is fundamental. We need to do lots more training for our judges. We've seen a number of judgments that are a bit scary when you look at what has been advocated or what has been decided in those cases. So we need a bit more training in that direction. And more importantly is when you are looking at regulatory enforcement, government needs to fund a lot of the agencies that impact on IP protection and enforcement in order to deliver on their mandate. I think, I don't know how I'm doing with time, Olabisi. There's so much to talk about in this field.
I thought as much. I know that there's a lot you want to unpack, but for the very brief time that we have. But I think you've covered it very well and very fairly, which takes me to my second question. We all know that, the patent system, the IP regime, system and mechanism is designed, to be a win-win situation between the rights holder and the public. It's designed that, when you want to protect your patent or your technology, you're required, to be transparent with the information. How did you arrive at this, invention? How did you reach here? How can somebody else work this invention in a way that, someone who is skilled in the art is able to apply your invention? How can the public, at the end, of the cycle of your protection, which is 20 years, how can they benefit? So I think I really like, for that standpoint of, the win-win, protection regime, I like that IP, should be spotlighted always. And so my question is, we know that we have quite a number of patents filings lately. I may not be able to say whether they're local filings or they're international filings, but I know that for every patent, application that is made, you will need to make disclosure of, the information that can work the patent. So my question is, as in your own experience, Obafemi, as the disclosure of patent information helped Nigeria to leverage the pharma technologies in patent documents that can, help in stimulating further research that can grow the economy. If you understand my question, I want you to give it a shot. Or if perhaps because the Nigeria patent registry is not designed to examine patents, substantively, maybe it impacts Nigeria's ability to benefit from the transparency of the patent process. If you understand my question, Obafemi, I'd like you to just give me your thoughts on that. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Olabisi. As we all know, the grant of a patent is a grant of monopoly, is a grant of exclusivity. And so because you've come up with an invention, the law or the government, as it were, grants you that monopoly to exploit commercially that invention for the next 20 years or so. Now, in return for that monopoly, you give back to the government, you give back to the society what is called disclosure, such that in applying for the monopoly, you are to submit documents that will enable us understand how you have arrived, the process, the techniques involved in the patent that you are being granted. Now, the advantages in this, as Olabisi alluded to, one is that the wider society enjoys that privilege of having an insight into what you have done, and then people can work it at the end of the day when the patent term is over. And secondly, for those who are even more in the technical sense, from the ancillary disclosure that come with the main disclosure, they are able to work around that invention to do similar things that do not necessarily infringe on your patent, but it helps the society to ensure that innovation continues, innovation is improved upon, and the larger society can benefit from it. So this is the beauty around the concept of disclosure. However, there are challenges with disclosure, and these challenges might impede the ability of the society to take full advantage of disclosure. For instance, when the title of patent does not really help a lot of times when we're talking about disclosure. The owner of a patent, the man who has been granted patent, reserves the right to title his invention in any manner he wants to title it. And because of that, when you go to do a search about an invention that has to do with an agricultural equipment, for instance, the title of that patent may not necessarily suggest agricultural equipment. So it puts you on a large, wide field as to what you're searching for in order to get the kind of information you have. So maybe we need to start thinking about some policy direction in the regulation of titling of patents. So that is definitely one thing. And then when you also consider the fact that in the pharma industry, a lot of R&D goes on. And R&D can take a while in coming to final conclusion. In order not to lose patent, the pharma companies would easily run to the patent registry to register a patent. And at this point in time, because the invention has not been fully developed, but what they have is a semblance of success. So what has been submitted for patent does not give the full information that is able to help the society or other technical people in understanding what they have done, until that patent has been finally, the invention has been finally been discovered, and then they can go back to update the records. But at that level, you find that the disclosure is limited and you are unable to take advantage of it. But let us assume that all of this is there. How do we leverage on it, to progress our economy as a people? Now, you find that in Nigeria, we still need a lot of people to get in the technical field to encourage more innovations and all of that. That is important. Also, if you look at India as an example, I think the government of India was able to take advantage of the lapse of patent and encourage an economy built around generic medicines, for instance. So do we have a policy system in Nigeria that encourages, generic drugs? Have we put in place things that will allow people that what they've seen in the disclosure document, there is the enabling environment for them to ride on it? I think that is very, very important. Is the time up? I see you smiling.
Yes, it is. I hope you can just pin it there when we get to Q&A. Perhaps someone will ask a question in that.
Okay. Thank you.
It's always a pleasure, hearing you talk about it. You're so passionate, about IP. And that will take me to Honorable Chidoka. Good afternoon, Honorable. I hope you are doing very well. Annually, we know that Nigeria is losing lots of money to importation of not just raw materials, but in fact the medication itself, that can, help cure many of, the myriad problems that we have in the healthcare, sector. I know that there is potential and opportunity to build local capacity so that, the pharma space in Nigeria can become self-sufficient and our, overly dependence, on importation can be reduced. And then because it's, locally sourced and manufactured, we can have, a little more control mechanisms around it. And what, in your view, do you think is responsible for insufficient local production capacity for pharma products in Nigeria, such that we have to depend very highly on importation? And the second leg to that question, please, I want to take it together because of the time that we have, is that within the mandate of the National Assembly, what contributions can be made to address the gaps that you will discuss with us? Over to you, Chidoka. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, everyone, and I hope you can hear me. It was an interesting lecture listening to Obafemi. So like we'll do in the parliament, if you don't mind, I can yield some of my time back to him so he can keep lecturing us. Because I've actually enjoyed listening to him and benefited from some of his insights. One of the things he has said is that there are not, there are sufficient laws, so this is his forte, this is his area of expertise. But for me, once there are sufficient laws, if some of them are outdated, what we normally will do is it will be either a repeal and reenact or an amendment bill. So we're not talking about establishment bill anymore of institution or an agency. So we're talking about just amendment to bring it with the present day realities on ground to tackle the issues, because some of the infringements that might have occurred some years back will be different from the way it's going on right now with the introduction of technology and so. And so if we think there are enough laws, then I think that what we'll do is to, if possible, strengthen those ones we have with the present realities and make sure that people's, companies, IP generally is not infringed on. Secondly, also, you talked about the country. The first speaker spoke about Nigeria being a poor country, obviously. And we in government, so I'm not excusing myself, over the years, we haven't done the necessary things we needed to do. Making the inventions, making the, what will I call now, putting the budgetary proposals in the right direction. So the investment we need to make over years has eluded us. Take, for example, I remember one of the issues we had in the General Obasanjo's tenure was the issue about whether we spend $15 billion on power or not. And of course, subsequently, the probe that came after that. So if you're thinking of starting up a factory today in Nigeria, just like every other sector of the economy, you're going to be battled with a lot of power issues. And so it will make it easier for you to import from China or from India than to start a local production. Somebody also spoke, I think it was Obafemi, who also spoke about our ability to raise young men and women who are technologically driven, who can think smartly, who are being trained in such a way that they will be able to man some of these new inventions we're going to have. And so you have issues of power, you have issues of generally lack of infrastructure. And I must say that as a country, we need to up our game to make those infrastructure available. Also, ease of doing business in Nigeria. I heard the government issuing executive order talking about ease of doing business. You see issues where we have multiple taxation on businesses. So there are so many hurdles. The bottom line is also corruption. There are many people who want to just do their businesses and don't spend so much money on getting one license on the other. In fact, I even hear that in NAFDAC, I haven't experienced it, but I've heard that in NAFDAC, for you to get some of the permits you need for some of the drugs you need to manufacture, it takes you a long time. Do some of the things you expected, then the things will work out. So these are the issues, I think, the frustrations embedded in the system that will make a local production outfit think twice and then make sure that he doesn't just put his money and lose his money. But most importantly, also, another important factor is access to capital. In most places, if today, the job of the banking sector is buying and selling of money. So when they buy from you, they give you at 3 or 4%, and when they sell to you, they sell money at you for 21, 22%. Even right now, it's 27%. So you can't go to the bank without them asking you for your generational tree, your generational properties for you to bring as collateral, and then of course make other demands from you. And then when you start it, you now have issues with government as well in terms of multiple taxation, as I've said earlier. So these are some of the issues I think that we in the National Assembly, we keep looking at all the time to be sure that we help Nigerians have ease of doing business, bring about legislations that will help our country. And of course, I think today, I'm looking at the other paper for today, the Finance Bill 2021 is coming up for first reading, if I'm not mistaken, today. And in such, it is where we articulate the financial direction of the country in the next 1 year. And such, if we get them right, it will make sure that some of the obstacles we have in establishing pharmaceutical companies in Nigeria will be eased out, and people can now bring it in. Nigerians also, well, due to the endemic poverty and the get-rich-quick mentality we have in this part of the country, is that the IP infringement, of course, will continue. Counterfeit will continue. The Rakin of blessed memory of NAFDAC came in and fought heavily against those who import, fakes, and of course, who infringe on other people's intellectual property. I have a slide somewhere. Unfortunately, I'm not able to upload it to show you also when you talk about comparisons, when you talk about filing for patents in different countries, Nigeria, Ghana, and all that, we need a rethink of where that is just not only brick and mortar in our schools, but people are taught also to make use of their intellectual capacities so that we can think up of new ways, of new pharmaceutical products, of different things that you need to patent, and then, of course, the laws are there to guide you.
Thank you very much, Honorable. What I hear you say is that the issue of insufficient local capacity is not an isolated problem in Nigeria. It's connected to everything else that we're grappling with. And yes. I'm just curious to know what contributions the National Assembly has presently. Perhaps you can identify one or two laws or amendments, that the National Assembly is working on presently to address, all these overarching problems that is not peculiar to the pharma industry.
So like I just told you about the finance bill, the details, of course, if you've gone through them, the details will be out. One of them being that if you look at, I think, if I remember clearly, there is a reduction in payment of taxes for imported vehicles from 35% to 5%. Some have argued, and in such way, it just, being able to stimulate the economy so that people can really invest in areas of their choice. Also, I know there's an IP infringement bill, I think additional rights bill, if I'm not mistaken, that is before the floor of the House. And this is where I want to talk to Obafemi, because I think that for such people, there's private member bill. Like he said, hold me by the shirt. We're ready to work. If there are areas of amendments that we can bring in to put on the floor of the House, then we can do that. Also, if you look at some of our sittings and all that, you will see numerously, we're also even in the budgetary proposals, trying to make additional funding possible for some of the key universities, because they also need research centers that will help in making sure that that will bring about new innovations for the manufacturing sector, even in the pharmaceutical sector. So the National Assembly, in dealing with some of these issues, are also making budgetary proposals towards addressing the infrastructural gaps. Okay, and I think that that's one of the key things that if it's done properly, and then once it's done properly and is monitored properly, and we can eliminate corruption as much as possible, probably eliminate corruption to 20 kobo to 1 naira. But as it is, Nigeria today is about 80, maybe 60 kobo to 1 naira. So they will make sure that whatever we budget for is being used judiciously. Then you will see that the economy will open up, and then we have the right people at the right places. That's one of the issues I also see. One of the laws I would like to see is a situation where that, just like in America, before the president can even put in, it's important. What I'm about to say is very important, because from my understanding of some of these issues when we go out, before the president can nominate ministers, let it be people that have proven knowledge of the portfolio or where they're headed to. So that when you're talking about pharmaceutical issues and IP issues in pharmaceutical industry, the person you're talking to, who is the policymaker, ordinarily can understand with you the issues we are talking about. He already understands what issues are, and he can tackle it. So when you're putting a mechanical engineer or somebody in the pharmaceutical industry, or somebody who doesn't have any idea of what we're talking about in those areas, then it becomes a problem. So we as legislators, what we do is sit in there, we might not, but we can actually help move those laws that will bring about peace, order, and understanding of the areas, in question.
All right. I hope when they nominate the ministers, you won't let them just take a bow and leave.
No, I'm totally against that. I'm totally against that. Whether you're a former member or not, you have to show us your understanding, because there are other bills we're amending. For example, we are trying to, I might take you a bit, away from the pharmaceutical industry, if you don't mind. For example, when you're talking about the oil and gas sector, which, of course, as of now, brings about almost 48 to 50% of our revenues. It used to be almost 90%. And then you find out that the issues we have are people who don't understand what they are. The Nostra Amendment Act, vis-a-vis the DPR, vis-a-vis the new PIB coming up. You see, if you have industry experts, it makes our world a lot easier. So once they are bringing new ministers, they start de novo. They start all over, not minding the kind of work we've put in before they arrived. So these are also the issues in the pharmaceutical industry, where generally the decay in our infrastructure, the lack of ease of doing business in Nigeria, just the same malaise that is facing every other sector in Nigeria, will also, of course, affect the pharmaceutical industry. I want to see also where there are better research centers where people can sit in, put in the work, and put in the finance required. If for example, a medical scientist wants to bring about a new drug, I know some of these R&D, some of them will cost you billions of dollars to come about, and many years. So where is he going to get the funding from? The banks are not patient enough. They always want quick returns on their money. So they're not going to give you that ability to sit back and make the research, bring about the novel ideas, patent them, and then make sure that the laws are there to guide against infringement on them.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. We already have a book that we're going to, tailor after your comments. I'd like to go to Tanya at this time. Tanya, is your mic on, please?
Yes, I just turned it on. Can you hear me?
Yes, we hear you very well. So I know that the US is very, passionate, and very involved. One thing I like about the US is once they have, issue about anything, they put their legs, their heads, their toes, everything, they immerse it into the particular issue. And intellectual property enforcement is one of such issues that the US, has, interest in. And I'd like to ask you, in the context of transnational intervention, to safeguard the health and safety of human lives. Can you please describe to us, the initiatives, that the U.S. government, has in, running right now to protect the sector and the populace, within the region. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. First of all, good afternoon, everyone, and thank you so much for having me here. I always enjoy telling more about the ICHIP program and discussing the work that we're doing. When you talk about transnational intervention to safeguard health and safety, as BC said, the U.S. puts its whole head, heart, and everything into it. The U.S. recognizes that global health and security go hand in hand, and that this globalization requires sort of an all fronts attack. At the US Embassy, there is the CDC, or the Center of Disease Control, that works very closely with the Nigerian CDC. And there's Walter Reed, the Health and Hospital. We have PEPFAR that's working to help eliminate AIDS. You have USAID that's working to supply medicines and to work with the supply chain. So there are many agencies that are working to help with transnational, with global health and safety, with the idea that the world has become so interconnected that helping the health and safety any place else would also help Americans. So those are some of the things that the US is doing. Those, however, are things that are not necessarily within my wheelhouse, because the things that we are doing more specifically have to do with enforcement. And one of the earlier speakers, I think it was Mr. Obafemi, and he spoke about enforcement. Did I get the name wrong, BC? I see you smiling. Okay, I was close.
Good attempt.
Okay. I hope that you at least know who I'm referring to, which is the speaker. He was a partner at the law firm. And he talked about enforcement as civil, it's regulatory, administrative, and it's criminal enforcement. And the criminal enforcement piece is the one that is closer within the wheelhouse where I am working. And the colleague from PwC who gave the white paper, in some of the recommendations that he gave, greater collaboration was one of them. We work with customs officers, we work with investigators, we work with prosecutors, and our goal is to help build enforcement within Nigeria and within the region, recognizing the transnational nature of these offenses. And we're trying to build capacity within them to better enforce these criminal laws, to better recognize what the transnational connections are, and to better investigate and to prosecute some of those perpetrators, some of those individuals who are making the drugs, who are bringing the drugs, and the investigations that can delve into that and to find it. Another aspect of that capacity building that we're doing is working to build cooperation and collaboration within the private sector. Often, the private sector, the private pharmaceutical companies in particular, they have information about some of the counterfeits that are coming in, about who some of the people who are doing the counterfeits. They have certain tools to find out that kind of information, where the counterfeits might be surging, where their brand is being infringed. And then you have law enforcement with their tools, and to marry them and figure a way that they can work cooperatively and collaboratively to better investigate and to better prosecute the ultimate targets, the ultimate criminals, to bust up the criminal networks. And that's the kind of work that we're doing both in Nigeria and in the region, because as we said, this type of criminal activity knows no borders. It's all over. So you're muted, BC.
Thank you for catching that, Tanya. I didn't know. So I'm beside a construction site here, and there's a lot of noise, and so that's why intermittently I'm putting up my mic. So on the heels of that, Tanya, I'd like to find out, what U.S. best practice would be like, or best practice example of the interworking of institutions, to strengthen IPR protection that Nigeria may be able to adopt. Earlier on, when Chijioke was giving us the white paper, he mentioned, the place of collaborations, between regulatory agencies and enforcement agencies. So for the U.S. perspective, can you give us examples of how these institutions, work together to strengthen IPR and give recommendations for Nigeria? Thank you.
Okay, well, one of the things that the U.S. has is the IPR Center, and that's a collaboration of about 20 different law enforcement agencies, and it works with some international agencies as well, the Royal Canadian Mounted Police, the London Police, Interpol, and they work together, and they also have segments that receive information from the private sector, and they work these investigations, and you will have someone from the IRS, someone from FBI, someone from Homeland Security with the global trade investigation, each bringing their investigative tools, their investigative expertise to better make a larger case. And that's certainly one of the tools that the U.S. does quite a bit, working together across agencies so that you can have that expertise from the different groups. What we also have is working closely with the prosecutors. Prosecutors have to get involved with the investigations from an early stage to assure that the investigation is looking into all the facts that are necessary to prove particular elements of a particular case. It can be a very disastrous situation when the investigator just plops the file on a prosecutor's desk, and then it turns out that many elements the evidence for certain elements are missing. When the prosecutor is involved at the very beginning, then the investigation can proceed more efficiently, more effectively to prove those particular charges. And in addition, working with the private sector as well, we have many instances where a prosecutor is doing a case, but the private sector or that particular company will know of more instances of counterfeit, and they make those connections and can make a larger case to better reflect what the scope of the criminality is. And that's one of the things that the U.S. really does work on and focuses on. And that's a practice that we have also been trying to incorporate through our work with the working group that we have. Our working group consists of prosecutors from NAFDAC, as well as prosecutors from in Kenya, from the Anti-Counterfeiting Collaboration, and from other investigative bodies within the region, and trying to replicate some of that, to determine who the ultimate sources are, to determine the scope of the criminality for particular cases. And those are some of the practices that we're trying to build capacity to do better here on the continent, and some of the practices that we also do in the US in making some of these cases.
Thank you very much, Taya, for giving us all of these details. I remember last year, 2019, the American Business Council, together with the U.S. Embassy, held the IP Symposium, and we discussed, very, firmly these issues. And there were a number of outcomes, including, the production of the fishbone. And on the advocacy standpoint, I'd like to know to what degree the fishbone material, has helped, in creating awareness around counterfeiting, and also to highlight some of the outcomes and what the status is regarding, all that was deliberated on regarding the issue of illicit trade around counterfeiting.
Okay, I think there was 3 questions. One first had to do with Fishbone, with the film. We're very pleased with the film as an awareness building tool. We actually showed the film to some of our counterparts in Francophone countries where we had our interpreters translating it. And it does make an impact whenever anyone sees that. And we plan to use that even further. And if anyone out in the audience would like to sponsor a showing, we'd be very happy to help participate in that. I don't know if any of you saw the film Fishbone, but it's basically a film showing the hazards of counterfeiting, counterfeit medications, with a Nigerian produced film and an actress that many of you know well, a well-known actress, who ended up being a victim of her own cartel, her family member being a victim of her own cartel with counterfeit medications. And it ended with discussions with various enforcement agencies. We thought that was quite an effective tool, and it was televised on the Nigerian Television Authority earlier this year with as a part of the World IP Day. So that was certainly one thing that came out of it. Another initiative that came out of the IP Symposium is it's still a nascent federal agencies network against counterfeiting and piracy. And the hope is that this sort of an agency will be the kind of interagency investigative body where they can all pull from each other's expertise and better enforce criminal enforcement, certainly, of IP violations within Nigeria, and that they can work together and help each other. And it includes the police, it includes customs, NAFDAC, and some other agencies, the Nigerian Copyright Commission, and many IP investigative agencies. It was still working to help it launch, help it get off the ground, and certainly with COVID-19 slowing everything down, I think it also slowed that down as well. And I believe Fishbone and other initiatives, there was another question that you asked, BC. I'm not sure that I've responded to all of them, but if anyone here has any questions of me or any questions of our programming, please let me know, because we really are very excited about the work that we're doing here in Africa. And with the ICHIP program, the work that we're doing worldwide. I have ICHIP colleagues in many parts of the globe with the idea of building capacity to better enforce transnational crime, working with my colleagues in these various other places, including in Asia, where, as we know, a lot of the counterfeits come from. So we've actually made 1 or 2 connections with some cases there, so we'll see where those can go. But these are the things that we're doing and trying to help build capacity to better enforce criminally these counterfeits and other pharmaceutical offenses. And you're muted again, BC. I see your lips moving.
Oh, okay. So for about a minute, I think I was locked off. There was a problem with the page, but I'm back here. I think you actually answered my questions. There were 2 of them, if I remember correctly. And thank you. Our time is fast spent, and I'd like to ask the audience if you have any questions for our panelists, before they do their wrap-up session. If there are any questions, now is the time to raise your hands or put them in the chat box. Any questions? When there are no questions, it means to me that everybody just, had a good time learning and taking notes and brainstorming on next steps. Is that right? Okay, I think actually that is what it was. With Joseph's permission, I'd like to ask Mr. Agaba and Tanya that based on the white paper that PwC shared with us on the impact of weak IP, enforcement mechanisms and all of that, if you want to share with us, new areas perhaps, that your organization is beginning, to identify as areas of intervention, perhaps already ongoing, or things to look forward to in the incoming year. And that question is for Tanya and for Obafemi.
I guess the lady goes first.
Okay. That's no problem. I'm happy to go first. Well, the one thing that he did mention, and I actually, in talking about the PwC white paper, and I've already sort of harped on it, is the more we talk with our investigator colleagues, we learn that they really have a lot of interest in working more cooperatively and collaboratively with the private sector. As I mentioned earlier, the private sector often has information that law enforcement can use, but law enforcement obviously doesn't want to be a tool of the private sector. But then again, the law enforcement also has tools that could be helpful for the private sector. So figuring out that sweet spot where they both can help each other and work well and work cooperatively and collaboratively, that's one of the things that we've been working with our working group. And another thing is for agencies to work well and cooperatively together and effectively together. So when Customs does a seizure, who will do the investigation, and then bringing in the prosecutor, and having all of those agencies work well for the benefit of a larger, more fulsome, more comprehensive, and more effective, I guess, criminal prosecution, because those are the things that we're working on to build capacity in that area. BC, you're muted again.
Okay, I promise I'm not going to put off this mic till this session is over, in the hope that we won't be hearing construction noises. Yeah, so I want to ask you, Tanya, am I safe to assume that the working group that you speak for gets to work with people like Janssen Pharmaceuticals, the ones, who opened this meeting and gave us, an elaborate, concept around parallel, importation and how it affects, the trade. Would that be correct?
That would be correct. For example, sometimes a person in the working group might see a product, a Johnson & Johnson product. I think one of our working group members in the Gambia did see such a product, and they will share this information, share the photos with that private sector entity so that they can test it. They can find out more about the supply chain for that product, and we can they can work with each other to determine A, that it is a counterfeit product, let's say, B, where it came from, C, how it got there, and to try to build the case in that way. And so, yes, our working group members definitely work with the private sector pretty closely, because an IP right ultimately is a private right. When it becomes a criminal issue is when it does have this adverse impact on health and safety, when there is a large commercial aspect to it. That's when it becomes a criminal matter, and that's when we become involved. And working with the private sector is crucial, and that is one of the ways that they do it.
All right, thank you very much, Tanya. Over to you, Obafemi.
He's muted now.
He got the bug from me.
Okay, are we there now?
Yes, sir.
Good. So two things. Just to reiterate, intergovernmental agencies cooperation is fundamental, and we need to be able to put them together. And I'm saying this because of past personal experiences where one agency had seized a lot of counterfeit products, and in no time, they said because it didn't meet one of their requirements, they released it when it could have gone to another agency to deal with the situation. That was very, very sad. Secondly, Honorable, indeed our laws are good, but some of them are outdated, and we need to work on them. I am aware that there is a new copyright bill that has been passed on to the executive, the Federal Executive Council. We need that to be finalized and sent to the National Assembly for passage. We have the IPCOM bill. We need that law to be passed like yesterday. Unfortunately, this is virtual, and I cannot hold your rope I wish it was physical for me to physically hold on to that rope and follow you to where we ensure that these laws are passed. We really hope that that is something that can happen during this legislative season, and perhaps as a 2021 gift to the IP community. Those two laws are fundamental. Please and please, on behalf of everybody here, commit to helping us ensuring that these laws see the light of the day, the bill see the light of the day. Thank you very much, everyone.
Yeah, I think, Obafemi, you already just answered the Honorable's final wrap-up question, because I was going to ask him, what should we be expecting, from National Assembly next year for this industry? But if you think that Obafemi already is holding your rope and you already feel strangled, you may skip. Otherwise, we would like to hear from you, Honorable Chidoka.
Can you hear me?
We hear you now.
Can you hear me? Sorry, as you can see, I'm just on the way due to network. Okay, like I said earlier, and he mentioned, these are areas that we can collaborate, of course, and work with assiduously to make sure that we bring about the best laws. Unfortunately, some of the things Obafemi said, I couldn't hear him because I went out of network area, but at least I have an idea of what he's saying. And from what you've said, it is an area that we can collaborate with. So if there are laws that needs to be repealed and amended, then we're very open to it. Just the commitment to it, and of course, we present it to the floor of the House, and we'll follow it through. I mean, it's also a cumbersome process due to our cumbersome politics in Nigeria as well. But it can be done. And I'm definitely committed to it to be sure that those of us in the pharmaceutical sector, or those of them, all of them are well protected as well.
Oh, okay, so two of the bills that you mentioned is the Industrial Property Bill, IPCOM bill, otherwise known, and the Copyright Bill. So those are the bills that we expect that yourself and your colleagues will look into, and will be attributed to this assembly, and when your tenure will be over. Thank you very much for your time. Thank you for sparing your time with us and sharing your thoughts with us. In the absence of any questions, I would like to hand over to Joseph, but I'm still anticipating that we have at least one person who wants to either make a comment or ask a question. If you are that one, please unmute your mic and make your contributions. Thank you.
So just a quick one. I also find out at what stages the bills are, the two bills he mentioned. Joe, I'm going to get the details from you or from him afterwards, so that I can find out where the stages of the bills are, whether it's first reading or committee level or whatever, second reading, whatever they are.
Yes, everyone on this network, the ABC, the US Embassy, and the IPLAN, we are all abreast, of the stages of these bills, and we would work as a team, to make sure that you have a copy of them after this meeting. Okay. Joseph, can you advise me if there are questions in the chat room? I don't seem to be able to see them anymore. There's a problem with my device, I think.
No questions so far.
Oh, excellent.
Yeah.
Okay, it means it was clear enough, simple enough, and everyone buckling up their belt. All right, on this note, and I hand it back to Joseph. Thank you very much for your time. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you very much, BC. So handing over to Joellen Owen from the USPTO to do the closing remarks.
Great, thank you, Joseph. This was a wonderful program with lots of synergies and ideas for initiatives going forward. In that regard, I would just mention that the U.S. Patent and Trademark Office is getting ready to sign a collaborative MOU with ARIPO to provide assistance and capacity building to ARIPO members and observers in 2021. So we're very excited about that. It is building on a previous relationship that we have established. And over the last 6 months, with the collaboration of Tanya, we have been hosting webinars. Not ideal, but during these times, that's what happens, on a variety of intellectual property issues, and we will be
I think that's something with our internet.
Yes, I don't sure.
If you can put off our video.
Okay, I'm not sure she's even. Oh, she left the meeting. It must have been a connectivity issue.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Okay then. Okay, so thank you everyone for attending. Well, thank you for taking our time to attend this wonderful session with our wonderful panelists, and we'll be sending summary. Okay, she's back.
Oh, yeah, I apologize. Obviously, network issues everywhere. I think we're all on overload. But with that, we'll just close and thank the American Business Council of Nigeria for hosting this program and putting us all together for some additional initiatives for the new year. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I also want to thank Johnson & Johnson for powering this session. Thank you, everyone. Have a great day. Bye.
Thank you, everyone. Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you very much, everyone. Have a lovely evening.